All right, I just wanted to start with a few admin things. Welcome everybody. This virtual event will be recorded and images may be captured throughout the session that could be used for promotional purposes in the future. If you object to your photo being taken, please ensure to turn off your camera. You can ask questions in the chat during this, or feel free to raise your hand. We've made it so everybody can be on camera if they wish. So we begin this gathering by acknowledging the land on which Brock stands in this traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. And acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of our Indigenous people. So again, welcome to everyone on behalf of the Office of Alumni Relations. My name is Darren Fox. I'm an Alumni Relations Officer here at Brock University. Thank you for joining us for our second webinar in our leadership coaching series entitled Essential Skills for Leading. Our speaker today is Lisa Wilson, a proud Brock alumna who graduated with a Bachelor of Business Administration. Lisa is a leadership vision coach and human resource cultural consultant, and a whole host of other certifications I'm not going to go through. With 20 years of experience and training, we are fortunate to have Lisa with us today to share her knowledge to help us become better leaders. I will now hand things over to Lisa.
Awesome, thank you so much. So I'm going to share my screen just so we have something else to look at as well. I can still see everyone and I will have the chat open. So feel free to comment whatever. I will be watching, and Darren has agreed to help me, that if I miss something, he'll watch with me just in case. So essential skills for leadership. This is a huge topic, but I think we'll touch on some of it today, and I'll try and go through all the other pieces that I believe in when it comes to the essential parts of being a leader. Before COVID hit, what I would have said is we often put people in leadership roles without the experience yet. So they just get tossed into a role because maybe they were the best at their job and they don't necessarily have the skills or the tools yet to move into that. And I don't know if any of you felt that way, but I most certainly did. In one of my first leadership roles, I was tossed in there because I was ready, and I learned a lot along the way. I made quite a few mistakes. Thankfully, I was working for companies that were okay with that and who supported me through those mistakes. We fixed them and moved forward. And that's basically what you have to do in that case. And this is supported too by, I don't know if anyone else here reads Brene Brown, but I'm a big fan of hers and her leadership book. When they did studies on this, and I love when there's someone that does studies for me, because I'm not that way inclined. But when she actually studied this, they talked to leaders, and one of the things that they said was they were put in these leadership roles and they didn't know how they provided value anymore. So suddenly we're in these leadership roles, we run all day, we're run off our feet all day, we're having meetings, we're answering emails, we're doing this and that, and there is zero at the end of the day that is like tangible. There's no email, there'll be emails, but no spreadsheet, no paperwork, nothing that you can like hold in your hand and say, I accomplished that today. And so this led leaders in their first roles to be like, how do I even provide value here? And that was before COVID hit. And then COVID hit. And if you were in a leadership role, your role got a whole pile harder, just a ton harder, because now not only were you trying to lead, but you were normally when we're in our leadership roles, we have one or two people at a time that are having issues. When COVID hit, everybody had something. People who had kids were suddenly being teachers as well. People who were living on their own had lost all their outlets. So now they were by themselves all the time, and that made things difficult. Everyone had their thing. People had parents that they were taking care of in homes and things like that. And everybody had something. COVID affected us in some way. And as the leader, you had to be cognizant of all of those things, plus your own stuff, because we all had something. And it's still not over. And then we had to make these decisions on what's safe today and what's not. So my answer to all of these things, whether it's the first part before the COVID hit or after COVID hit, is that if you have a solid foundation and you're running that team from that solid foundation where everyone's working together, you can work through these things a lot easier. There are a lot of companies that are thriving right now, and it's because they've created cultures that have that strong leadership and that we're able to move through these things a lot easier. So we're going to talk, like I said, about some of the essentials, but obviously in an hour I can't do everything. So again, this is about having a solid foundation and knowledge of who you are as a person, number one, and who you are as a company. So if you are running your own company, you need to have the clarity on that. If you're working for someone, you need to get clear on what they expect as far as the company is concerned. The better your foundation is, the easier it is to deal with what I'll call life events. And COVID is just another example of a life event, but it was a pretty extreme one. So it just took things to that much worse. Like I said, you usually have one or two people that are struggling with something. Now you had the entire team struggling with something. So it's our job as leaders to make sure that we can manage them. And that doesn't mean we take care of everybody's problems. It means that we learn a way to handle ourselves so that we can walk through whatever issues have come. And then again, it doesn't mean that we also come up with all the answers. If you have a team, there's a reason you have a team. They have skills and knowledge that you don't have, and they have expertise that you don't have. So let them work with you. And that will make a lot of the difference. And those are the teams, like I said now, that have functioned and done really well. So a lot of the leaders that I've worked with through COVID are exhausted. I was actually just speaking to one of the leaders the other day, and she went through not only things with COVID, but she went through a pretty severe experience in her role while I was working with her. And she's kind of come through that, and she's on the other side. And we were talking, and she said, "I just feel blah right now." And I said, "Okay, explain." And she said, "Well, there's things to be excited about, but I can't find it in me to be excited right now." And so we talked a little around that. And I think it's just having the last 18 months of all of the pressure of not only COVID, but they are in the middle of a huge modernization project. And then she had this particular issue with one of her staff who they had to terminate because what he did was very severe. So just having dealt with all that, now she's just kind of feeling, oh. And I don't think that that's a weird place to be right now. So if you're in that place right now, totally understand. Some are doing better than others. Some have dealt with more than others. But when you have this foundation, it is a lot easier to come back because the rest of the team will come back quicker, if that makes sense. So we want to make sure that as a leader, we're not there to make all the decisions. So we're not doing that. There's no need for that. When, like I said, when you have a team, you have a whole pile of expertise to work with. When the leader is making all of the decisions and no one on your team is helping with that decision making, or you're not getting feedback, all that happens is you have an exhausted leader. And it looks like micromanaging, even if that's not your intent. So they don't mean to do it. As a leader, you're just so used to kind of giving the answers. It's not helpful at the end of the day because people start to think you're micromanaging. You feel like you're overwhelmed and stressed, and that's not helping anyone because then you're not showing up to be the best leader you can be. So when this is happening, and I do work with clients that are doing this, I hear from exactly that from them. They're exhausted and they're frustrated with their team because they don't understand why the team isn't where they think they should be because they've hired some really great people. So if you're coming to learn more about how to make all the decisions, you are totally not in the right place right now. That is not what I'm here to tell you. But do have a solid foundation and know who you are. So what we want to have, though, is that we want to have a really clear picture of what we want, where we're going, and we want to create an environment that allows people to join us on that vision or in that mission. And once we do that, it makes our lives so much easier. And it creates an environment where we can make decisions easier because everyone already knows where we're headed. So they can make decisions without us even being present, and they're likely going to be decisions that are taking us in the right direction. When we're doing that, it, like I said, it allows for much better decision making because you have more than one person's and one thought process going into a decision. You have people that actually feel motivated because they feel like they're actually contributing to something. And as the leader, it takes a lot of the pressure off of you. So think about that. If you're struggling right now, imagine having the time to look at the long-term projects that you haven't been able to look at for a long time. You know it's there, it's in the back of your mind, but because the day-to-day is so busy, we sometimes don't have a chance to get there. But when you get your team functioning in this way, you have the time to do that. I had a manager that I worked with at one point, and what he used to say to us all the time as the management team was, get on the balcony, get on the balcony. And I didn't totally understand initially what that meant, but I pictured in this way. If you think about a team, if you're running a company and they're building trenches, if you are running from trench to make sure that they get, like, that the two trenches meet, you're going to be exhausted. But if you get on a balcony, you can now see everything that's happening. So you can see each thing that's happening in front of you. And as you, the way I put it is, as you sort of move up in the organization, you need to be seeing further and wider effectively. So you want to be looking at, you know, if you're the supervisor, you want to be looking a week to a year out, and depends on the company where that lands. If you're in a management role, you're now looking a year to 5 years. In a senior management role, you're looking 5 to 10 years. So I equate that to each level in the balconies. So you kind of move up. When you're an entrepreneur, you're running from the top to the bottom all the time. You're looking 5, 10 years out, and you're looking a year out at the same time. But that's what you want to be doing. So imagine having a team that functions so well that you actually can stay there on the balcony, where you're not running up and down and you're not going in to check what's happening in the day-to-day. So now, if that's the environment you're looking for, this is where you want to be today. So Darren has already done a wonderful introduction, so I will move on from this slide. But does anyone, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. I've got a couple of slides where I'm actually going to ask you guys questions, so we can throw them in the chat, or if you have something to say on it, feel free to unmute yourself and chat. I tried to make this only a half hour long so that we could have time for questions and comments. Make sure, I always find it better if we make sure that everyone's getting their answers in the while we go along, and it just makes for a more interesting conversation as well. So this is what I call my 4 pillars. So I look at it this way. If you're going to be in a leadership role, we're going to touch just on 2 of them today and just quickly on both, but vision, mission, and values is highly important. So I've seen companies do this. They create a beautiful vision, they create a beautiful mission, they stick it up on the wall and they leave it there and they don't live by it. Not even a touch. It's a process that they had to do and it's not really lived. It's important that you have these and that you're living them every day. The more you do this, the easier it is, like I said, for people to make decisions on their own because they know what the vision is. The way I put it is this. As a leader, we're here to set the vision, so we set the road. So if you think of a long road heading out in front of you, and there's going to be different missions within there, but they're all taking us down the same road. And the values then put up the guideposts on that road to make sure that we all stay on that same road. So if you think about it as that way, I like visuals. So knowing where you're headed is really important, and being able to communicate that to your team is huge. And that's when we come into the second thing. I use DISC when I'm training with leaders or when I'm coaching with leaders. It's a personality assessment. There's Myers-Briggs. I did them when I was in university. I've done several different ones. There's True Colors. There's something called Herman Brain Dominance. There's lots of them. Any personality assessments you've ever done, these are really helpful. My preference is just DISC. The reason I feel that this is important in one of the pillars as well is that you need to understand yourself and why you're behaving in a certain way and how that works with people who aren't like you. So we can all behave in all 4 behaviors, but some take more of our energies than others. So the idea here is not that, oh, I'm just this and the rest of you must change your behavior to suit me. The idea is that, okay, this isn't working for me today. Can we talk about it in this way? And it gives you a language with which to talk about. So it's understanding yourself, number 1. And then secondly, the members of your team and how they need to be communicated to, so that you can communicate to each of them in their own way. And then the role of a leader. Our world has changed a ton. And this has a new expectation of leaders. We can't be the quote unquote boss anymore that comes around and just tells people what to do, because you can't keep up with everything. The world changes so quickly. COVID for me has been a great example of that. In the first month of COVID, I called a few of my clients and I said, look, I can't take you all on at once, but I'm going to hold a space for you. So we're going to just have a weekly meeting where we can come in and talk about what you guys are doing, what you need to do, what you've heard as far as the rules, things like that. And we did. We came together, and each week there was a new rule that they had to change. So there was something happening every week. And these were all leaders that were on their own. So they reported to a board of volunteers, obviously not around a lot. So it was really helpful for them to have this group. But that was the example, is just literally week to week, they could not keep up with the changes. And that's what's happening in our world on a regular basis. Zoom was didn't exist 10 years ago. It had started to build, and then COVID hit, and it was this huge company, and suddenly they found all the holes that they had, right? So I can't even imagine what they went through behind the scenes, because I had Zoom prior to COVID and I watched all the changes happening and how quickly it had to happen. So they must have had good leaders in there to make sure that those changes were happening, or they got some real quick. So we don't just come to work for money anymore. The world has very much changed. I've been hearing about it for the last 5 years at all the Human Resources Professionals Association conferences and any other business conferences. People aren't just working for money. They never did, but now they want to work for a company that they know is making a difference. So you as a leader need to be helping them to see why they're doing that in their current roles. And then last, but definitely not least, is the difficult conversations. I call it this, but it's crucial conversations as well. There's lots of different ways you can say it, but the better you get at this skill, the better your team can work together. So it means that we can work together and disagree. And if we disagree well, we actually come to better decisions. So it doesn't have to be an argument every time. It can be, and that's okay. If you can get to where you need to be and everybody can be heard, that's really important. And as a leader, you need to be able to have that skill that not only allows you to speak, but make sure your team is comfortable speaking to you so that difficult conversations can happen. So like I said, we're going to touch, I think I did difficult conversations earlier this year, so you can go back and look at that one. But we're going to touch a little bit on the other two here. And this, looking at these 4 things and paying attention, will create an environment where your people aren't afraid to speak, where everyone is pulling in the same direction and creativity is fully existing, where you're actually moving forward towards the vision. And when the world hits, because it will, life will hit, you're able to manage and change course quickly. Keep still going towards the vision, but just change that course very quickly. So we're going to talk about how you add value as a leader, because I think that's really important, but also then the piece around mission, vision, and values. My expectation today is that this is a conversation. So I know I've talked for quite a bit, but it is a safe space, no judgment here. We've all made mistakes in our leadership. It's better to ask the question, because I guarantee you somebody else in the room has the question. And if they don't, someone who's watching the replay had this question. So ask it, please. I learn from everyone's experience, so hopefully people are comfortable to do the same. So I'm happy if you ask questions or say, hey, I'm dealing with this, what do I do? And I say what's discussed here stays here, but it's recorded. So if you're really uncomfortable, please get in touch with me after. I will put all of my, all of the connections in. And if you don't want anyone to know who asked the question, just go in the chat and send the question just directly to me. Put a note, don't say my name at the top, and then ask your question, just so that I know, because sometimes I don't notice that it's been sent directly to me. But that's another way to get it answered here and now without having to use your name behind it. Well, I would normally ask for it to be here. And I normally ask that because I'm from a small community in Northern Ontario, and the same people come to events and we all know each other. So I have to request, do not say anything. So I want you to think about this, these 2 questions, and I'm actually going to ask in the next 2. I can't create a poll when it's a meeting like this. We can only do that in the webinars. So, I'm just going to get you to go into the chat and answer these 2 questions, but I have numbers in the next 2 slides, so you can just put in the numbers. I'm going to give the caveat, though, that I want you to be aware that the answers, because some of them people get insulted by, The answers are not mine. They actually came from a poll I did. I did a presentation like this. I had a quite a large group there. So I asked them to answer these 2 questions for me. And these are the answers that repeated themselves over and over. So just think about when you took your first leadership role, what did you think it would be? And if you're in your first leadership role now, that's fine too. If you've moved on, try and think back to that first one. What did you think it would be? And then what did it turn out to be? So go to the next slides and I'll give you some of the answers that repeated themselves. So if you want to go in the chat and just put the number, if you don't like any of these answers, feel free to give a different answer. That works too. I do have the chat open, so I'll start seeing them. So why did you take on the leadership role? 1 is I love what I do and I wanted to make a difference. 2, it was the logical next step. 3, I was the only one available to take the role. And 4, I run a company, so I got so busy I had to hire. So awesome. I love these. We've got answers coming in already. Okay, good. Lots of 1 and 2. Helping every organized beef or fish and raise money. That's awesome, Lori. Solving HR problems. 2, Dina, nice personal growth. Laura, 1. Danielle, I'm guessing that, or Lori, that was a 1. Daniel and Sarah, 1 and 2. That's great. Okay, so I'm really happy to hear that. The 2s, maybe not so much. It was the logical next step, because the next one might be a little harder to answer for you. But the 1s are good. Love what I do and wanted to make a difference, because then it's easier to know your why and remember it. So how do you feel about the role now? Again, 1, I love it, wouldn't change a thing. 2, feel like I'm babysitting. So that's the one that I gave the caveat before. These are not my answers. They actually came from a survey, and that answer came up so many times that I couldn't not put it on. I thought through, I was like, how do I find another word for babysitting? But that's the word that they used. Love the work, but get bogged down in things I do. That's number 3. 4, not at all what I expected, and I'm frustrated all the time. And 5, I move between love and hate for the role. Number 3, yes. I hear that one a lot, Holly. Daniel, awesome. Awesome. Number 1's the best answer to get here. If you love it and wouldn't change a thing, you're doing well. Lori, can I combine 1 and 3? Absolutely. Any answer is acceptable here. Love it, wouldn't change a thing, but get bogged down. Yeah. Dina, not a babysitting, but a bit of a counselor. See, some people do. Maybe that was a better, well, no, still the word was very much babysitting. It was repeated and repeated over and over. 2 and 4, feel like I'm babysitting. It's not what I expected. So David, that's probably you and I should talk more after this, but we'll talk a little bit about today of some things that will definitely help with that. So Matt, 3, 1 and 3. Yeah. So that's not uncommon. Like I said, these 5 answers are from a survey I did. So, these are the common repeat responses, right? So I'm going to give you the next piece. Oops, I went backwards. The next piece I'm going to give you is I'm going to talk about what my view and what my belief is around what a leader does. This came from a really terrible experience in a company. We had a dirty little secret, and we were an international company, but the dirty little secret was that we were literally still killing people. So people were still dying in our workplace. Not good. So they brought us all together, and they brought people from all over the world and all different levels of the organization. So I got to go as an HR person. There were health and safety people there. There were supervisors there. There were frontline employees there. Just a different mix of people. And we came up with this, what a supervisor does. It was actually our supervisor training that we were creating. And this is the definition that we came up with for a leader. And it's short, but it holds a lot of responsibility. So we are modeling, teaching, creating, and developing a commitment to personal responsibility. So that's huge, because sometimes we think what is personal responsibility is really not. We have employees that blame everyone else around them. We feel, we're struggling all the time. But when we can model that behavior, so what does this look like? If I make a mistake, I say sorry. If I need to talk to someone, I speak to them directly. I don't go behind their back. Things like that. Whatever's important in your company and your values, you need to be modeling that behavior. And then teaching others to have the same behavior and creating an environment where they can. And that piece for me is really important, creating that environment, because I hear leaders say sometimes, oh yeah, for sure, people are open to speak to me. And then I go speak to one of their staff and they're like, well, yeah, but then I asked a question and they did this. So, maybe you don't catch it, you're rolling your eyes at people. So that's not creating that environment, right? Or you're shutting people down. So then you want to develop that commitment. So as you've created the environment, you work with others to develop that commitment within themselves. So I talked already about Brené Brown and her research, and in the role as a leader, people really weren't sure. And this is what you're doing. You are responsible for the culture in the environment that you're working in. And that means a lot of things. It means that if someone has stepped out of line, it's your responsibility to bring them back in line. And that doesn't necessarily mean discipline, but it can. It depends what it looks like. It depends what has happened. So I'm not going to go into all the different examples because that's just not possible today. There's just too many. But sometimes it's about saying, and COVID again, great example of this. Sometimes it's about saying, you know what, you're not doing the best job right now. And what does it look like? And how do we get you back there? Sometimes it's about, hey, you know what? This is the fourth time I've talked to you about it. We've come up with 4 different things that could help you and you've not done it. Now we're going to talk about discipline because I can't allow you to keep working here if that's what's going to happen, right? We all have that responsibility, both to the person working as well as to the company. And so you have to keep that in balance all of the time. So anybody have any questions about that? Like I said, you put in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself. I'm happy with questions by. Okay. So I'll go on, but as we go on, feel free. I think there's a raise your hand button at the bottom of your screens that should work too if you want to chat and I'm not stopping talking because sometimes I talk too quickly. Just feel free to raise your hand. You'll pop up in the front top of my screen. So some essentials. Now, I know there was a couple of you that you sort of just logical next step as far as taking on the leadership role. And so, oh, okay, thank you. So we do have a question. I'll finish this slide and then I'll answer that question. So really important as far as your essentials is remembering your why. And so if you didn't have one because you stepped into the role for the logical next step, why did you take the job in the first place? So maybe go back to why you decided to work for this particular company and look for why we're doing this. So that goes back to the vision. Get really clear on your vision, mission, and values. I'll say that again, and then communicate that to your team. So these are really important. And if you haven't communicated it to your team lately, do it again. Especially through COVID, when I was giving presentations about how to handle life through COVID, that was one of my slides said simply communicate, 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 and communicate again. Because people forget, especially under duress or stress. So COVID tossed us all into stress. So you wanted to tell people again and again and again. So if you haven't talked about your mission, vision, and values lately, talk about it again and put it in your conversations regularly. Okay, so we had a question about managing union staff versus non-union and yeah, how not to feel so handcuffed in challenging situations. So I've worked in both, just so that you know, and I don't change a thing in how I handle things. So I still deal with people directly, union or not. So if we need to have a conversation, I still have a conversation. If the union needs to be present, that's okay. I handle the conversation in the same way. This is what we're doing here. This is our mission. This is what we're trying to do. These are our values, and this is my expectation of you in those values. And even with the union stewards, I had a really good relationship for when I could with the union stewards. Sometimes I didn't. And when I did, though, it was really good because the union steward and I would sit down and we would talk about it. And we would discuss when we were holding a hard line for a reason that we didn't feel was we'll say correct in the person in this particular situation. So if you're working with a union, that sometimes you have to go forward with the grievance, even though maybe in this situation you don't want to. And the union is dealing with the same thing. They have to move forward with the grievance, even though they don't feel it's important. So when I had that relationship, I could have that conversation with the union steward, and I would say, and he would come to me and say, Lisa, I don't really want to push this forward. I fully agree with you. But I have to. And we would do that. We would then have the conversation in front of others. And it was really funny because he actually would act it out harder when he didn't believe in it. So when he didn't believe it, he would like slam his fists on the table. And then I would be like, well, dude, it's a safety issue. And then he was like, you know what, you're right, it is a safety issue. But behind the scenes, him and I had a conversation. So he knew when I had to push and didn't want to, and I knew. Now, in other cases, though, I did not have that relationship with the union steward. So I still just dealt with people one-on-one. I had actually a union steward who I started to refuse to speak to. He was a bully, and he'd been allowed to bully for years. I wanted to discipline him, and my boss gave me a direct no to allowing him to be disciplined. And so I said, then that's fine. I will not put myself in that situation anymore. I will not put myself in a situation where he's going to bully me. So I won't have the conversations with him. If he started yelling at me on the phone, I would hang up. And then I eventually just stopped having conversations with him altogether. But I spoke to different stewards when I needed to. And obviously it was still polite to him, whatever, when we had to be in a meeting together. But if he started being rude, I would leave. Now, the thing about that is he spoke to the other reps and said to them, because I stood in this, so I knew why I was there, I knew what my values were, and I knew what I was and wasn't going to allow. Now, at this company, I was not allowed to discipline this person. So I just made it clear to him that I won't accept this behavior. He had more respect for me than any other manager in the place, and told the steward that I did speak to all the time. She was like, Lisa, I don't know why you two don't talk. He has so much respect for you. And I was like, yeah, because I'm the only one that put him in his place. So what you want to do, I don't think there's any difference whether it's union or non-union. What you want to do though, is you have to work within the rules when it's union. So just find a way to work within the rules. That's the more difficult part. That's the only thing that's different for me, is that you have to find a way to work within the rules and still get to that vision. So it's still the same thing. COVID, when there's accidents on the highway to get to work, like anything like that, you just find a way around things, right? You find a way to keep going, but you find a way to work it through to still we're still going down that road, and we're still being really clear on what that is. So I hope that answered your question a little bit. I know I sometimes answer in stories, but keep that. If you know your why, you know your vision, you know your mission, and you know your values, it doesn't matter whether there's a union there or not. Everyone is expected to behave in this way. And then they get real clear very quickly on what is and is not allowed. So employees got to know me very quickly that there was a line you just couldn't cross with me. And that was okay. I was still willing to listen. I actually spoke to someone who worked there with me, and he told me he was shy, but he was very early on in my relationship with him. He would come and say the worst things to me. And I was like, shy? And I said, well, you weren't shy with me. And he said, well, I knew you would listen. So if you have that, if part of your values, and I really hope it is that you're going to listen, that if it's really important to you to hear everything, then really listen, even when you don't like what you're about to hear, because you're going to not like what you're about to hear sometimes. So another question, how do you overcome toxic workplace environments professionally and workplace bureaucracy from top-down favoritism? So here's the thing, when you're in a toxic environment, if you're in a role where you can change it, great. If you're not in a role where you can change it, you need to move on. So the one where I talked about that union steward, he was toxic. He was a toxic personality, and I wasn't going to allow it, but I wasn't in the place where I could change his behavior. So because I wasn't allowed to do what I needed to do, I still made it very clear to him that he wasn't like, he couldn't speak like that to me. So he never did, but which just created that we didn't speak to each other because he was so used to doing that. I think really you have to start looking for a better environment. So do what you can to change it so that it's not happening for others. But if you're not in a role where you can do that. So how I say this is, so say if you're working for a large organization, You're not going to be able to change it from the top down. But if you are the leader of a team, you can change your team. So you can change what's happening with your team. So if there's toxicity happening around in the other teams, you can live with it as when your team is functioning well. And here's what will happen. If you get your team functioning well and better by doing all of these things that we're talking about today, and obviously more, but making sure that your team is functioning in the best way possible, they can almost block out the rest of the toxicity, and it'll start to vibrate through, because people will want to come and work on your team as opposed to anybody else's. So that's the best way to do it if you really don't want to leave the company, because I know sometimes it's really hard. Where I had that union steward that I didn't get along with, there were so many great people that worked there. Such a wonderful environment outside of him. Like, as far as the people were concerned, it was really good, except for him. So I could handle around his sort of toxicity. But if it's really toxic kind of from the top all the way down, then you want to look at somewhere else. And I don't know, because it was direct message to me, I'm not going to say your name, but if you want to talk to me more after, I'm happy to do that, about what you can and can't change, right? But if you are the leader of a team in that organization, if you change the way your team functions, then it will ripple. People will start to work more like you guys are. Or they'll be coming and asking you, how did you get that? How did you get that? So want to talk quickly about the difference, but again, feel free to continue to toss in the questions as they come. So the difference between a mission and a vision is, I want you to think about it as an army or Navy, whatever, any type of military environment. The vision probably for any type of military is to protect, right? They're protecting their country. That's the general vision for them. We're here to protect. And that's what I always say about visions is it's a thing that you can never get to. Best company I worked for was Magna International. And they didn't call this their vision, but it is drilled into my head. The first line they had something called the Magna Charter. The first line of the Magna Charter is, we make a better product at a better price. And that is the only way that you ensure job security, by making a better product at a better price. So it was really clear to all the employees that that's how we were going to exist long-term. And you can never get there. You can never be making the best product at the best price, because it's a moving target. So like I said, the world changes so quickly, right? So that target is constantly moving. So it's a vision that keeps people moving forward. And they posted it under their job security. Like that title was job security. How do we ensure job security? We continue to make the best products at the best price. That's what we're here to do. So it was really, really clear, and we all knew it. So when we were aware as HR people that our job was to make the job as easy as possible for the people who are actually touching the part, because that's what we were here for. It didn't mean I was less than them. I was still treated very well. But it did mean that that was our focus. And so I knew in my HR department, I was constantly striving to make the job of making the part easier for the staff. So it was really, really clear vision. Like I said, they don't call it their vision statement. I'm sure they have a different one, but that for me was really clear on where we're headed and what we're constantly striving for. Now the mission, again, a little easier when you think about a military mission. So it talks about what you're doing right now. So if you think about when we have a military, we have a large group, and then there's missions within that. And the missions within that may be to go, well, when you watch the movies like Saving Private Ryan, the mission was to go and get him home, right? Like that was one mission, but there was still a ton other stuff going on in that company, but this was this group's mission. So a small group of people working together towards one specific goal. So you want to think about that in your mission statements. I'm a big believer in having vision and mission statements, not only for the company, but for your own department. So if you are, I saw someone wrote, and I don't remember who, but something about being in HR here. So I always had a mission and a vision statement for my HR departments, and I created them with the team. So we all knew how we fit into the company's vision and mission. I just saw another question. So I'll go a little bit more into that, but once you get it, why do in private companies HR leadership have limited authority and capacity to act per the HRM standards? So, so here's the thing about human resources. Human resources is there, but We're there, and people think that we are the guarders of all the rules, like that we are the people who are going to take care of every rule. It's not. We're there to guide, and we can only guide. We don't absolutely have the authority, but when you have a good functioning management team, your HR will be at those management team meetings and explaining, okay, this is why we want to handle it this way. And then production will say, but this is important to us, and you have everyone working. So no, HR doesn't have the full authority. And I think that's a confusion. And what I used to hear all the time was, I'm going to go tell HR. Well, HR can't do anything about it. We can guide, we can mediate, we can do all of those things. But at the end of the day, the leadership is the one's going to make the decision. So the CEO is going to be the one that makes the choice. Depends what that looks like for you. Maybe it's a general manager. Maybe, like, I don't know enough about your corporation or who you're reporting to make that. They are there, like I said, to guide, and that's the best that we can do. We do know well. I had a manager say to me once, he's like, Lisa, I'm an engineer. If I make a mistake in engineering, I should be held highly accountable, but you're human resources. If you make a mistake in management, you should be held more highly accountable than I should, because that's your area of expertise. And I agree with him on that. But then said to him, but here's the problem. I tell you what to do and you don't listen. And he was like, oh. So we then had a discussion of, okay, when I talk to you and I tell you why I want this done this way, then you need to hear me and you need to listen. And so it actually worked out for our situation. But unfortunately, no, HR is there to guide, and we can't force management into anything. We do our best. It is a struggle for us. Like I said, I saw someone else write in here in HR. So if you have another thought on that, please feel free to toss it into everyone. But we really are there to guide. We are not the guardians. We can only guide and explain and try and get them working in a way that works, that is working better, which is sometimes a frustration, because we have some leaders that come in and it's wonderful, and we have other leaders who just, push back all the time. They want it their way, and so we have to work really hard to try and guide them. And for me, it depended on the organization, how much support and guidance, or how much support I got from leadership. So if they, I had some places where if they made a mistake and the leaders found out that I had advised them to do something different and they didn't, they were in more trouble than not. So it just depended on the organization and what that looks like. So the vision answers, what do we do going forward? How do we want to do it? When do we want to do it? And it's there to inspire your team. So like I said, it has to be that thing that this is where we're going and we can never get there. So, making a better world or making a better product. I had some other ones, but I don't have it in my notes here, but there's some really good ones. Like I think Apple had a really good one, because again, it was one of those things that you can never get to. The company I worked for was Magna, and I loved it. A better product at a better price. And we all knew that's how we were going to keep our jobs. So we all worked towards that. And so when I say this stuff, I'll talk more about it later, but when I say this, Magna not only said that, but they had policies and procedures that met that. So they let their staff, they had something called winning teams, and I can't remember the name of the other one, but it was, and something ideas. So that anyone, no matter whether you were sweeping the floor or whether you were the GM or anyone, you could come and give through an idea that was going to save us money. And they would take you to a big party at the end of the year. We all got, big company swag, like coats and things, if you were part of one of those winning teams, or if you had come up with an idea that saved a certain amount of money, you got certain gifts based on the amount of money you had. We also got like the service things, so 5-year awards, that kind of thing. But if you'd come in and save the company money, better product, better price, then they were gonna celebrate that. And they had a huge party at the end of every year. And it was beautiful because it was in the Toronto area. So it was a gala type. So people dressed up, and in the Toronto area, what that looks like. It's a whole pile of different people from different backgrounds. So the beauty in that room, like the different dresses and suits that people wore, was just amazing. So they really supported it, even with their policies. So the mission, what do you do today, for whom, and what's the benefit? So again, think that military mission. How are we doing for time? Okay. And then your values. And this is important. So one of the things I work on with leaders is, do you know your own values? And are you really clear in your own values? And can you break them down to a few values? So there's tons of different ways to do that. Like I said, I talked about Brené Brown's leadership book. She's got one. I met a man recently who does it slightly differently, but she wants you to get yours down to kind of one core value, whereas someone else wants it at like 10. Find one that feels comfortable for you, and use that. But if you don't know what your core values are, I do have an exercise as well. So if you we'll give you my contacts. If you want that, I will send it to you. I know mine very well, and I use them in everything I do. The better you get at that, the more people are clear with what you will expect and what you don't. And then, are your company values clear? Are they even written down? And if they're not, can you guess what they are by the way people behave? So I do a course. I do it 3 times a year called Leading with Ease, but I also go into companies and give that course. I went into one company and their values, they talk often about their values, but they're not written down anywhere. And so in my presentation, that's what we talk about, right? We get clear on that. And so I said, well, okay, we will then just guess what the values are. So instead of trying to figure out or find where they were written down, we sat down and we said, okay, what do we think the values are? And the 6 of us in that room were able to come to 5 core values that we really felt that the organization had, because of the way we behave, and we knew what the expectations were. So while they hadn't written it down, their culture was very strong and it was there. So they might be there without actually having written them down, but if it's helpful for your team, write them down. Write them down and have them close. So this is what's important to us. I think this is a huge thing that every company should do. And it's really important, like I said, to do them, but then to follow them. If you're not living them, people will know. They will know. So if you have a value to one thing, so I always use McDonald's as an example, but I don't know if people see this as much anymore. But when I was young, McDonald's was supposed to be the happiest place in the world. At least one time when I would go in, some kid was getting yelled at in the back in front of his peers. That's not the happiest organization if you're yelling at your staff in front of their peers. There's a better way to handle that. And continue to be the happiest place. That person obviously needed to be, they needed some change in their behavior, but don't do it yelling at them in front of the rest. That's not the way to do it, especially if you believe you're the happiest place in the world. So these 3 have to work together. So if your vision is to have a better product at a better price, what values do you think need to go around that? And just think about that. So having a better product at a better price, I'm going to guess innovation needed to be one of their values, and it was. So they need to match each other. And think about it. Like I said, McDonald's, happiest place in the world. We're yelling at our staff in the back room. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. So make sure that they work together and they complement each other. Don't say this is your vision and then have a value for something that totally doesn't take you there. I'm just going to pause. Okay, there was another question that came in. So bigger picture view, how does HR department align with the company's bottom line objectives holistically? Oh, well, beautiful timing for that question, because the next slide actually answers that. So here's the thing. The better you are at being clear on your vision, your mission, and being clear on your values and knowing what you do as the leader. So I don't think I touched on that enough yet, but as the leader, what do we do? I kind of talked about it at the beginning, but we are the guardians of that. HR is partially the guardians of that as well. They're there to help you, support you as the manager to keep that really clear. So how HR objectives are always the same as the company values. We are making sure that we're creating, or we're doing our best to create an environment that where people know why we're here, they know what our vision, mission, and what our values are, and they can make decisions on their own. That's the idea. We cannot keep up with everything that's going on right now. So as leaders, it's really important that we be the people who know the mission, vision, and values, and that we're living them every day. So I talked about my definition of leadership, and it's that personal responsibility. So you're modeling personal responsibility, and personal responsibility for me looks like living my own values every day, knowing what my mission is, and my vision. So my vision is fairly simple. I had to rewrite it because I wrote it in somewhat negative way, but it's creating better leaders. As that's what my company does. I'm creating better leaders. And so I know in everything that I do, I'm stepping in to try and help people become better leaders. And what that looks like, that's why I have like the 4 pillars and things like that. When you're doing this, your employee retention rate definitely goes up, your productivity increases, and your morale increases. And it's hard to quantify these. And that's why I love people like Brené Brown, because she's researched it. So the more people, the more you're clear about this, and I see this all the time in what I do and where I've worked. When the mission and vision was not clear, people were kind of working all over the place. People were pulling in different directions. The communication wasn't there. When the mission and vision are really clear, we're all working in one direction. We all have those guideposts. We know what we're allowed to do. And if we wanted to shift the guideposts, we had more difficult conversations. So for example, the company I talked to where we came up with that example, with that definition of leadership of creating that personal responsibility. For us, it was around safety. It started around safety because people were doing things they shouldn't have done and they knew better. They knew better. We had trained them to know better and they did it anyway. We were still struggling with the how. They also weren't telling us when they were having near misses. So if you've been involved in health and safety at all, you have so many near misses to each accident. So they weren't telling us that stuff. And so now we'd been working this way, which was production, 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 production. And everybody was very production focused. And what we needed to now do was shift a guidepost. And so that's why they brought us all together. They brought us all together. And then once they brought us all together and they had the reasons behind effectively why people were dying, they had all the reasons behind it. Then we went out and we trained all the supervisors. And we trained all the supervisors based on what we had talked about. So if you're solid in that, and they have managed to, I unfortunately left the company, but I kept in touch with some people and they have changed their stats as far as that goes. People are working in a very different way now. So it was all production. And then they went, oh my Lord, too much production. We've lost control of safety. And they shifted this one and went, we still need production, but not at the cost of our team members. And it increased everything. So now think about all those people that went to that got invited to that meeting. Do you think our morale went up? Do you think we wanted to work for that company? Yeah, we did. Probably before we didn't. We were a company that was killing people. Wasn't very proud of that. But then we went to this thing, and then all of what they did was they brought in the leaders back to head office. So that's where they were trained, and they just created this environment where we all got along really well, and we were all able to meet people from all over the world. It was a lot of fun. And that just improved our morale. And then each of those leaders went back to make a difference in their piece of the organization, right? So when you're doing this well, so these types of things, when you're doing this well, it does do all of those things. It's just harder to quantify because you can't say, well, I bought 10 widgets and we sold them for X amount of dollars and this is the amount. There are ways to quantify it. It's not my area of expertise, but if you want that, I can find someone who can help you do that for sure. I know some really great HR people who can help you quantify that, but that's not the way I think. So we have about 5 minutes left. So I just want to get through these and then there's a couple more questions, but just want to go back through this. These are kind of the 4 pillars that I look at. Be really clear on your mission and vision, know who you are and how you communicate with each member of your staff because they're different than you and they need a different way of communicating. Know your role. Your role is to keep those guideposts up. Keep explaining the vision and keep those guideposts up and to have those difficult conversations. You need to be able to talk to people and you need people to be able to come and disagree with you. It's really important that your team be able to disagree with you. And last but not least, so that I don't rush this, but if you go on my information pages, you'll see I always offer a 20-minute call, but for this conversation, if you go to lmw-vip.ca, you can set up a 45-minute call with me. Happy to do that. I'm actually on vacation this week, but I'm back next and through August. So I'm happy to take those calls anytime. And even if right now it's just you want to chat with another alumni, happy to have that too. But I only do this for the presentation and I'll leave this open till 4 o'clock today. And then I'll close that link, but I will go in and put this, I can't do it while I'm chatting, but I will go and put the links in before we can. And there's all my information, but again, I'll have that in the chat momentarily. So I will stop sharing. And I do have one more question there. So I'll start answering that, but if anybody has questions, feel free to toss them in as I answer this one. So why don't Fortune 50 companies have standard training and development program once you get a chance? Cost efficiencies and maximize profits. Many of them do, actually. Some do, some don't, but the ones, like I said, the better ones I have worked for do have that training. It's how I got a lot of my training, actually. So they do have that. It's just depends on the organization. I'm just going to try and copy and paste this and see if there's more questions coming in. Oops. I'll also, like, if you have a question, feel free to just unmute yourself. So that's all my information, and then I'll put the link in as well for the VIP session. But I tried to make it easy to remember. It's just LMW, which is my initials or my company name, and I don't know why this is so difficult to copy and paste, but there we go. There you go. Okay. So, oh, nice. Someone just said I already answered their question. So, so I'm glad to hear that. The toxic environments are hard, and the union environments, while harder, I really don't think you change anything. You continue to work in the way that you work. You just have to work in a slightly different way. It's just finding a different way around the rule, but that doesn't change. Like, why I say it doesn't change anything is because we've got laws to follow as well. And we want to go over there, and there's this law that feels like it's getting in our way, but it's not. We just have to find a way around it. And why I talk so much about making sure that your team can talk to you is because someone knows how to get around it. Someone in your team knows how to get around it if you're listening. So make sure that they're talking to you, make sure that they can disagree with you, and make sure that you're having those conversations with them to say, well, this is actually what we're struggling with right now. And I know sometimes as leaders, there's information that we can't share, but there is information that you can share. So share everything that you can, because if they know what the problems are for you and for the other groups, then it's easier for them to come up with solutions, and solutions that aren't going to, like, sometimes we get a solution out of one department that actually messes up another one. So if you're talking to people, I worked for a company, for example, that we used to do performance review once a year, and then we would do our succession planning some other time. And I was like, that's ridiculous. It should be done all at once. So do the performance reviews, have them all done by the end of May, and then June we do the rest, because then they've already had their meetings instead of having a second one. So another question, you talk about good onboarding and what are good practices. Yeah, so good onboarding takes a while. And I think everyone needs to recognize that it's not a one day, because I think that's what people do wrong, is they bring people on and they think in this one day, we're going to get all the information to you. Think about how bombarded a person gets in that case. So good onboarding, recognize that it goes over a period of time. First day, obviously important things like where the bathrooms are, where do we eat lunch, what their role is, where they sit, where they can find pens, so less important now, where the printer is, stuff like that. Like, that's important for the first day. But the stuff I've been talking about like mission and vision and things like that, that does need to happen in the first few days, but it needs to be reiterated over and over. Because when I think about some of what we bombarded people with, like even at a place like Magna that had that very strong culture, in the first day, we went through the employee handbook, and that was overwhelming, I'm sure. I'm sure it was overwhelming, but what we then did was brought them back again to say, okay, what are your other questions? Like, what else do you want to talk about? So do it over a period of time and know that that's there, and recognize that you cannot onboard in a day. You cannot onboard in a week. It's a process over a few months. So make sure that when you have a new employee, that you're spending a lot of time with them over time. if I'm not sure, Lori, I don't remember if you were the HR person that we talked about, but if you're in HR, maybe set your onboarding over a couple of weeks. So like the learning the policies, procedures, things like that. But if you're a manager asking that question, then as the manager, be checking in with them once a week. How did you do this week? What do you need? That kind of thing. And okay, next week I'm going to teach you about this, and sort of have a plan of slower and more information. Really is the slower, but more information. Because I think what we tend to do is we think onboarding happens in a week. We hand them to HR for the first 2 days, and HR goes, bleh. And we just give them everything that they could possibly need. And then they're lost, right? And then you go back and you go, well, we told you that in the first day. Well, you told me a lot of things in the first day. So reasonably, can they be expected to remember it? No. So try and kind of give them some space to get there. I think that's the best advice they can give in sort of a quick answer. It's 1:02, so I know some of you have to jump off. That's okay. I'm not in any rush to get off, so I will stay and continue answering questions. Darren, I don't know if there's anything you need to do to close, so my apologies for going a little over.
Yeah, so I'll just quickly, if Lisa's going to stay on and if others want to, that's great. I just want to thank everyone for attending today. And sorry. I hope you learned something new and able to apply that, what you learned here today. Thank you, Lisa, for taking your time and sharing your expertise with us. Hopefully take advantage of Lisa's social media and just even reaching out to her as an alumni. She definitely would love to chat and talk with you and help you out, as you can tell. Before I do say goodbye to everybody, or if you leave, let everyone know that we have up and coming homecoming is happening this year as well, September 24th to the 25th, with some even on the 26th, some events. So we will have emails out shortly to alumni. Take a look at calendars and registration. We also have our AGM on Thursday, September 23rd at 6:30. So if you're able to partake in that, we'd love to have you out with that and join us in our annual general meeting. Just take a look for some upcoming emails shortly with information around homecoming. And back to you, Lisa.
Awesome. Thanks, Darren. Sorry, I went a little over. But like I said, I will sit and if anybody has any other questions.
Lisa,
I'm a co-host now, Darren, so if you have to run, I can just stay on.
I was going to say, at least I have to go, but thank you so much yet again for stowing your wisdom. Always some good nuggets in there. So thank you. Really appreciate your time. And great job.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. If anybody, I think everyone's more or less logging off.
No, not seeing any more questions, but no, just thank yous. And will the recording be shared is the only other question for
Yes,
from
recordings
Teresa.
will be shared. They will be up hopefully shortly. I'll be sending it over to someone to then put into YouTube, and it should be up in a couple of days.
Awesome. So is there a Brock Alumni YouTube page? Is that where you put it all up?
No, but they're all available on our alumni site. Anyways, there's already a list of webinars not pre-recorded, but that have been recorded. Right. They're there, available. So anything that we've done over the last 6 months really is more or less, I think, available there. So.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks all. Thanks again, Darren. This was a lot of fun. I always enjoy doing these.
It was
especially when people ask questions. That's my favorite. Yeah. I did not expect